Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria L, Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. Peace be still. My heart is fluttering. I am so excited. You know, sometimes you have those moments in your life when you say, I'm just glad the Lord spared me to see this day, like when your first child graduates from school or something like that. Well, I feel like that today because I am in the studio with some incendiary brothers, some brothers who are on fire and who are just so filled with spirit and knowledge that I can't wait to introduce them. And I want to say as much as I need to say because I don't want to say much once they get started. I first want to introduce my guest, Wane Sebamurti Gentry. I found him, I certainly can't say by accident. I found him when I was supposed to find him, and I'm so happy and so fortunate to have discovered you and your work, and especially that you have shared your book, The Nature of Intelligence, with me, which I am using like a primer. I am underlining, I am circling, I'm doing all the things that people do with information that is valuable to them because I want to etch it in my mind so that I can function accordingly, not just tell people about it, but actually act on some of the precepts that you have shared in your book. So I thank you for your work. And then, of course, Professor Kaba Kamene, an old friend, a guest who has been here time and time again, and who has just so much information. I just didn't really know where to start with this show, and I didn't know what I was doing until almost moments before we started, and I realized that we're all educators and we're all interested in spirituality, and I said that's the title of this show. It's education and spirituality. So we will go from there. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about the Shabaka stone. We're going to talk about education itself. Your definition is so on target. So I'm just going to start with you, Sebamurti, and let's just get off the ground with this concept, this misnomer, this misused concept and practice to which we have been subject for these many years here in captivity in this part of the world.
Right.
Sebamurti.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Peace, and I'm very honored here to be here with you and your wisdom, and also with Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene. Yes, the education here in the West is looked at as something that is pouring into your mind, information, something that's coming from the outside inward. But the word education has within it the root word educe, which means to bring forth and to lead out. So there's something within you that's supposed to be coming out, which is really the natural intelligence that all of us have within us. And to think that something has to come into you to guide you from without is really, as you said, a misnomer of what education really is. And our children receiving a Western education is really not accessing that real intelligence that they need to help solve all of their problems.
And it can't really be called education.
Exactly.
If it's from the outside in. Educere, the word, I mean, the root, the word from which education is taken, I mean, it defies use as something coming from outside in. So here we are confronted with a process that is being used on people, and every time there is a social problem of any kind, they say, all you need is education. You know, so they want to have some program of training where they come and bring some things and do some processes to you which have nothing at all to do with education. Professor Kamene.
It's really training what we're doing. You know, we train and we so have punishment, we have reward. In my experience, as Brother Sebamurti is saying, you're born with everything that has ever existed in the cosmic universe. You know everything that will ever be known in your lifetime, and you know all things that will one day become. So the idea is to become a facilitator, a guide. You know, it's like if all of the lights were turned off in this room, and then all of a sudden they're turned on. The question becomes, did the chair, did the table, did the cameras appear when the light came on? No, they were there before. You just didn't have your light on it. Mm-hmm. So a facilitator guides an individual to be aware that you know. Mm-hmm. So going back to the ancient Kemetic concept and the Dogon and other nations in Africa, when the root of their education was to facilitate that you know that you already know this. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, when you have something coming from out in, that's more of the person that's oppressing you, what they want to be on you. Mm-hmm. But truest education is something that's inside, and it's just a matter of finding the light switch so that when you turn it on, you realize, mm-hmm. well, it was in the room all the time.
Well, actually, you could not learn if you didn't already know. Because if you didn't already know, when somebody presented something to you, you couldn't know that you knew that. Mm-hmm. So it has to already, how can you know something that you don't already know? You can't. It would be foreign and alien and everything else. So you're quite right. We need to access that which is within. And that's why education and spirituality are so closely related. You cannot divorce going within, bringing what is within forward. You can't call that just academic stuff, just reading, writing, and arithmetic. That is the basis of your being. Mm-hmm. And it's important that we, that we understand that these tests that our children are undergoing, and these programs and these processes that our children are being subjected to are not making them good, better, or best. Mm-hmm. In fact, it is retarding because it never takes them into who they are so that they can be that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The purpose of education is to know thyself. It's not to become prepared to go out and get a job. You have to, of course, be able to sustain a living, all the things that's needed for you to bring up your family and work, but that's not the purpose of education. The purpose of education is to educe your humanity to the fullest, to know who you really are across the entire spectrum of your being. And that's why, as you said so eloquently, you cannot separate education from spirituality, because who you are is a spiritual being. A human being is a spiritual being.
Kamene, when I asked you to talk to me about the Shabaka stone, and you said you would bring some things for me, I did that because when I read Sebamurti's book on what is intelligence, he mentioned you, and he mentioned your knowledge of Shabaka stone. Now, I'm going to segue a minute to say that I know that that is not why you're in Chicago at the moment. At the moment, you're in Chicago because you're doing a melanin weekend. And so you want to tell us about the advantages and the power of the melanin that African people possess in great quantity. But I know that there's some connection here, because otherwise I wouldn't be trying to make it. So help me.
Well, there is, as you say, Dr. Peace, there is a direct connection between the Shabaka stone, cosmic reality, melanin, and all things that come from that. Mm-hmm. And the idea of melanin and education even. Many years ago, New York City, there was a forum. Brother Bill Jones and Sister Kefa Nephthys. It's called First World Alliance. And even the great scholar that is about to come after us, Dr. Yosef Ben Levi, spoke at First World. And I was there. Every Saturday they had a forum. And on one of these Saturdays, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard King, brilliant psychiatrist and melanist.
His science.
And brother was dropping some heavy stuff on us. He was talking about melanin. Mm-hmm. This was back in 81, 82. Mm-hmm. 1981, 1982. I had never heard of the word melanin. I'm a kindergarten teacher, early childhood, but I had never heard of melanin before. And I was in the back where most of the brothers were, because it was our custom that when the sisters came, if there was a seat that a brother was sitting in, if a sister came, we would stand up. So what the brothers used to always do is we'd just come and stand up anyway because we knew there'd be standing room only anyway. So I used to always be in the back with my tape recorder taping the lectures. Dr. Richard King must have seen in the faces of the people in the front of the row that we weren't understanding what he was saying. Myself in the back, but also people who had never heard of melanin. He said, okay, brother and sisters, let me explain to you like this. If you can understand plant photosynthesis, then you can understand human photosynthesis. Because chlorophyll is to the plant as melanin is to the human. Chloroplast cell is to the plant as the melanocyte is to the human. He was selling in Xerox form Black Dot 1, Black Dot 2, which would later become the first 2 chapters of the African Origins of Biological Psychiatry. I put it down because it was a little bit too heavy for me. I went back and with my kindergarten class, we started a project on plant photosynthesis. And I began to look at plant photosynthesis deeper because I was eventually going to make an analogy to it. Once we got the project done, I then started to make comparisons between the skin and the plant and the melanocyte and the chloroplast and chlorophyll. And then I began to see the connection. But not only did I see the connection as it related to melanin, I saw the relationship to what we call the African-centered curriculum. Because you do not understand biology if you do not understand melanin. It is equivalent to going to auto mechanic school, learning all about cars, but never learning the role of gasoline. Because what makes gasoline move the car is what the process of the creation of melanin is to the human. Dr. Richard King, our sister Frances Cress Welsing, Patricia Newton, Carol Barnes. I could go down the line of all the great scholars.
Don't go down the line without Phil Coran.
You can't.
And Hunter Havlin,
Adams
III.
Absolutely.
You know, they were holding these melanin conferences.
Yes,
I went to one in Texas. They were holding these early on, about the same time that you met Dr. King, Dr. Richard King.
It's not new.
Right. But what I'm saying is these were pioneers. These were people who were grappling with this powerful concept, and the jury's still out about the effect and the function of melanin, but we know that we have something very, very powerful in our being.
Well, melanin is in all organic life. The idea of the carbon atom, the molecule which we call melanin, all of that is in every human being. If you didn't have it in your eyes, you couldn't see. If you didn't have it in your ears, you couldn't hear. If you didn't have it in your body, you wouldn't function, your organs, your glands. But it's not just in the human body, it's not just in the plant, it's in the water, and it's in the cosmic reality also.
And it's in the reproductive organs, because if it were not in the sperm and in the ova, reproduction couldn't happen.
No, because the melanin in the spermatozoa is what gives the electricity to it to travel to the egg. In the feminine process, it is the magnetism of the egg that draws the sperm to it. So that when you have this dynamic process going on of a very electric spermatozoa and a very magnetic egg, you have electromagnetism, which is throughout the cosmic universe. So the way in which stars are produced, human stars are produced. And that is how life, the stars of Africa, came to be. Human beings came out of this dynamic process. On the earth, we have a coal, which under great pressure becomes a diamond. In the cosmic reality, we also have what Dr. King calls nanodiamonds, which later become the stars. Blackness that crystallize into stars is the same blackness that crystallize and create a human being. And it's a dynamic thing to understand as from a very young age, because again, you cannot understand biology, you cannot understand chemistry, you can't understand physics, the idea of movement, without understanding melanin. So we're here in the Chicago community to do 2 presentations and workshops on the role of melanin, but this evening one is how do we put it into the curriculum? How do we teach it to the children? Because people get very personal when you start talking about concepts of melanin. And when you look at the scholars that have been talking about it, the great majority of scholars that talk about melanin today, the great majority of them, are peoples of European descent. And then we have our scholars, as you named and we've named, that are now looking at it from another perspective. And I go back to what J.A. Rogers used to say, that the most brilliant scientists become fools when it comes to race. And this is as much important for peoples of European descent to understand. than it is for any other person to understand. Melanin is something that is in all of us. And it is not so much what we have as melanin, but it is the process of creating it. And the lifestyles that we're living today, the music that we're listening to, the people that we're associating with, the anger, the hatred, the animosity, is all killing that dynamic battery catalyst from being able to be produced. So it's something we have to look at.
And it's so important that we understand. I mean, you know, good Lord, you know, praise God that all of this is lying dormant in many cases within us, that we are satisfied to be these little dwarfs on this planet, you know, to be these little egos, you know, traveling around trying to make a name for ourselves in the hood or somewhere, when all of this is accessible to us if we seek it. We need to seek, and the earlier we can begin to seek the truth, to, as you point out, to know thyself, the sooner we get busy with that project of learning who we are as a people without apologies to other people who get nervous when black people want to know who they are. Because I think, you know, perhaps they think that should we discover who we are, we might do something radical, like invert the world, convert the world, or do something. So that, you know, we have to unabashedly, unashamedly search for ourselves. You've made it beautiful, for the good of all humanity. What good is it if you have a major part of the population that is anonymous? 9 of every 10 people that you can encounter on the planet are people of color. We're not a minority. So if a majority of the people on the planet are wandering around in ignorance of who they are, how can this be of any benefit? Can't this be harmful?
Very, very, very harmful. In fact, as melanin, in T. Owens Moore book, he mentions how, just as Professor Kamene has said, all of us have melanin, but it's the spiritual component that must be connected with the melanin capacities that you have, being that Africans has the greatest amount, that will really transform your consciousness into the type of human beings we need to be. So it's not just that you have the melanin in you, it's what you must do to ignite that melanin. There's a dormant, as you said, dormant within us is this energy that is called, by the Sanskrit term, Kundalini energy. And it's called Ra energy by African terminology. And that Ra energy has to rise up through the psychic centers within your body in order for the melanin that's throughout the whole body, not just in the physical body, but in the subtle body also, to bring you to your full humanity. We're walking around and we're actually living outside of our full humanity in ignorance of who we really are. And as long as we are not doing anything, just as it's the African tradition to go through rituals, to have rites of passages. You don't just become an adult and think that you're fully human simply because you matured at the physical level, which really does not involve much of your conscious participation. You're going to mature physically as you age to become an adult. But your emotional, your psychological, and your spiritual development requires your conscious participation. And so the melanin that you have in you, there's many of us walking around very heavily melanated, but yet our spiritual potential and our cultural awareness of who we are is stagnant. We can't produce anything. We're not producing anything. So it's about learning that other process, that spiritual component that you must annex to that melanin capacity that you have in you, that is going to make all the difference in the world and bring you to that state of awareness that you need to have operant in your life to create harmonious living conditions and relationships.
It's good that you point out that you will mature physically no matter what you do if you just stay on the planet. You will just mature. I noticed that some people call themselves elders, you know, because they mature to the point at which they are old in age. But I remember that Hunter said that there was a description of people having lived on the earth walking upside down with feces in their mouths, never really having lived. And so, you know, as you say, you're existing outside of your true self, so that you are really tentative. You know, you could be, except that you have not chosen to be. And so here you are, a proposition, you know, something that is being proposed to be, but you have not taken advantage of the opportunity to become. This is, you know, it's extremely important that we don't get so satisfied with who we currently are, because we obviously are not who we need to be, or the planet wouldn't be in this much trouble.
Exactly.
As you said, Doctor, you can be and not be becoming, but you can't be becoming and not be. Life is a becoming process. Our young people are watching people accumulate a lot of money, and they are spending that money and they're having good time, but their spirit is not evolving, because their whole purpose on the planet is to make money, spend it, and have what they're calling fun. But they're not becoming conscious of who they are, their divine purpose, their Nia, their purpose on the planet. What were you put on the planet for? You were put here for a purpose. You know, what's interesting is that there's another piece called the Aten text that was written, or I have a copy of it, that was written on the wall in ancient Kemet of the 18th dynasty of what used to be a prime minister of Akhenaten, they say. His name was Ai. And there's a ode to Aten, the sun. And it's 125 lines. The symbol of it is the sun, the Aten, because at the time, the pharaohs, and even pharaohs before them, that brought this concept of Atenism forward, said that they wanted to create a symbol of the Creator that all could embrace. Whether you were a human being of high stature or low stature, an animal that walks on four, a plant. And what they saw was that the one thing common to all humans was our source, which was the sun, the sun disk. And in the sun disk, you have hands that are extended out. There are right hands and there are left hands. The right hand concept is that is what gives. You give with your right hand, you receive with your left hand. And what was interesting is that the hands were touching, the right hands were touching the human forehead, the pineal gland. But at the same time, the left hand was out there too from the sun. So then what I think the metaphor tells us is that as the sun gives us life, as we live the proper spiritual life, we also give the sun something back. So it's a cyclical pattern. So that the idea of the process of becoming says that the sun gives us life, but the life that we live gives the sun life. And what we have to understand is that our purpose is the divine purpose. Each and every one of us, our ancestors called us children of the sun. We are not earthlings. We're starlings. We're bits of the star encapsulated in this mass that we call a body. And upon transcendence and movement forward, this body is going to return into the ground as nitrogen, but we're going to be constantly, forever flowing up through the Bennu bird or the Ba. This was the symbol of the soul. Our ancestors were some heavy people.
Yes, they were.
Real heavy. Very metaphoric, but there was no secrets in the universe. It was just for the conscious that would be open. Even the most humble, who opened themselves up to these secrets, could understand it. And yet the most brilliant would never get it, because they had not opened themselves up to the higher divine order and their purpose.
They were not worthy of the knowledge. The reciprocity of which you speak is existent in all relationships. You know, I sometimes use the metaphor of a mother nursing an infant. You know, it appears that the infant is receiving nourishment from the mother, but the infant's sucking on the mother's breast is helping to restore her reproductive organs to their proper size and place in her pelvic region. So that breastfeeding is not just for the child, it's for the mother too. And everything that is reciprocal has that mutual beneficial element to it. But we live in a parasitic kind of relationship. You know, the host and the parasite. We're just parasites on nature. We're just taking and looking for more to take and looking for more ways to take more without understanding that you can't keep taking and never give anything back. Otherwise, what will happen? You will exhaust the source from which you are taking. So the intelligence that it takes for you to realize that you did not create yourself and that you are on this planet for a reason other than decorations. We have flowers for decorations. That there is a purpose for your life. And it is beyond the roles that have been defined by people who have not got the intelligence to educate you because they cannot. Is that a do-it-yourself project? Education. With some guidance, do you have to really work at that, or can you just sit in a classroom and take notes?
Well, education hinges on attention, everything. I say that your attention is the most valuable thing that you have. And as you said earlier, about no one can educate you, no one can really teach you in a sense, in an external sense. You learn in attention. All of your learning take place in attention. That's why you can have a number of people in a room and someone could be facilitating a message and one or two may pick it up because they are given right attention and the other ones may not. It's in that attention that you learn. And that attention, as we were saying earlier, how everything is inside of you, that intention is inside of you. And it's the discipline of attention that brings everything into the field of your awareness. If you're not paying attention to things, something can be there, you can run right into the wall. But it's still there. When you pay attention to it, it brings it into the field of your awareness. Well, there's much more to the reality that exists in the universe that we do not know how to pay attention to because we've been miseducated.
Absolutely.
Not rightly educated. And so the conditioning factors that exist within our minds is blocking and obstructing the natural intelligence that we have in us. And it's through the disciplining of attention that you connect with that intelligence. And that's what real education is. Learning how to use your attention in such a way that you can connect with what is already within you, that knowledge that it encompasses the whole of the universe. Just like in quantum mechanics, when they talk about the no difference, you can't separate the experiment from the experimenter. The observer is the observed. In the same way that in all ways that we are looking at the universe and saying that these are scientific principles and the laws of the universe, they do not stand independent of the consciousness that is observing it. It is all coming from within you, as well as it existing outside of you. But you being illuminated to an understanding of what it really is, that's coming from inside of you. It's always inside of you. So that attention is the key. And it's through attention that you're going to learn. And it's from attention that you are learning, because what you're learning is about yourself. You're not learning about something that's independent of yourself. If you think that it's something external to yourself, objective, then that's a miseducation. And this is one of the things that we suffer from receiving a Western education, because Western education is prone to objectification and linearization, which is really not akin to Eastern and African ways of being educated, where we're more analogical, we're more synergistic, we're not thinking of things in a logical sequence of linear form. We're more holistic. We're more metaphoric. We're more symbolic. We're more right brain oriented. So our way of education have to include things that would help us to connect in the way that is conducive to our makeup as African people.
Well, you know, I don't have to say this because I'm just sitting here just about to be wiped out right here. But I do think that you have made me think a thought that might connect to what you've just been saying when you were talking about attention. Culture teaches you what to attend. Culture teaches you not only what of all the phenomena by which we are surrounded, what things to extract and what value to give to those things.
Exactly.
So culture teaches you the pluses to put on some experience and some objects, the minuses to put on some experiences and some objects. And so we are seeing and paying attention with a cultural bias which is Western, which is antithetical to the African mind, the way that the African mind has functioned down through eons of time. We are being, quote, educated, and we shouldn't be able to use that word, trained by people who cannot because they were tardy on the scene. We were already conceptualizing, paying attention, assigning values. All of that was already going on. And then we have some latecomers who come along, and you know all the things they did. I mean, they sacked museums and libraries. They interfered with every means by which we could transmit knowledge to our kin and our subsequent generations. So now the attention that we bring, we are distracted by the things that we are taught to pay attention to, and it's very difficult to try to arrest our attention or to take it away from the trivial things that have been made so important to us. So here we are with this attention, you know, with this corrupted attention that does not want to pay attention to what is significant, but wants to spend its time with things that are fun. You use the term. We want to acquire things. We want to acquire things and dispose of things and have fun in the process. And it is not fun to look for yourself? Go ahead.
I was going to add to what you said, immediate gratification.
Okay.
We're living in a world where we want to be rich now. We want to play the lotto and win millions now.
And what will we do with these millions?
That is the question. We would just spend it because the great majority of people who become nouveau rich regret winning anyway because they realize that that's not what they were after. To continue what Sebamurti was saying in reference to attention, I was given 2 classes. They were 8th grade classes a couple years ago. The teacher was having a problem with them. The first class that I had was, they told me, were children who were at risk, ready to go into what they call special ed. Still don't know what that means, because we all need special ed. The class that followed was considered to be the gifted and talented class. And through my year of having both of these classes back to back, which was given to me by the ancestors, I believe, to show me something, to prove something, I always used the word hotep. When classes were getting off the point or were moving around, I needed to kind of bring them back into focus. Another word for attention. Concentration, I said hotep. And the only difference between these 2 classes, the classes that they said were at risk and the gifted children, was in the class where the children were challenged or at risk. It took me at least 5 to 7 minutes to get them quiet. In the class that was so-called gifted and talented, within 7 seconds, that class was quiet, ready to absorb, ready to learn, ready to interact. I say this because attention is the key. When you're focused in on something, it's like when someone turns that light on and you begin to see something. I know I've been in my house before, and I asked my queen, I say, is that new? No, it wasn't new. I just didn't focus on it. She said, that's been there for 2 months. But it's because I didn't focus on it, therefore I didn't see it. And the human mind functions like that. And our problem is that we are living someone else's world. We're looking through someone else's eyes.
We're having somebody else's experience.
That is correct. And it is not our God, because we are God having a human experience. And once we understand that we are God, made in his, her likeness, once we embrace ourselves and understand, the financial material world is really insignificant when you stop and think about it, because you're not bringing none of that with you once you move on. And it was only symbolic when
you didn't bring it with you when you showed up.
It is true. It is true. So the real question goes back to what the biomineralist Dr. Sebi says. The most important things on the planet were here before you ever got here. So just what's in your hand. Just take that, move with it. Appreciate the fact that we woke up this morning. That's the blessing. Even if you have a bad day, that's a good day, because at least you could experience it. Count your blessings for the small things, because it's not the material world. Because the great majority of people who attain the material world are not happy, as we see in the news. So what is it that we're on the planet for? It is to become one with ourselves. Brother said, know yourself. Know yourself as it relates to the cosmic reality. That is what the Shabaka stone talks of. And that is what the Shabaka stone is, a rewritten version of a much older document that's called the Memphite text, the Memphite theology, because it was found in a place called Memphis, or Menefer, or Hikupata, was what we called it. Today it is called Memphis. But this is what the Shabaka stone talks about. And Dr. Diop, in his book, talks about civilizational barbarism. Chapter 17, Does an African Philosophy Exist? Dr. Jacob Carruthers speaks of it, the great Chicago brother, ancestor and elder, brilliant scholar, talks to us about the importance of the metaphor. And Sebamurti, I've heard you talk about the importance of understanding the metaphor. I had to look up in the dictionary a word when Dr. Asa Hilliard said that the metaphor is figurative language is ubiquitous to the African mind. I had to look that word ubiquitous up, because it means all up in there. Every part. It's like asking what part of cheese isn't milk. The metaphor, when you look at hip-hop, rap music, bebop, all of that comes out of a relationship with playing on, projecting things onto other things in order to give you a holistic view of what it is that you're dealing with. And the Shabaka stone is a grand metaphor. It takes in all of the concepts that figurative language would be, but most importantly, Dr. Diop says there was one thing that was radically different from the African mind that the European mind still has not grappled nor understands, and that is what existed before existence existed.
Now, you know, you're about to hurt my feelings right here and right now, because that's the only way to think, and you can't even think the thought. That's why it's hard to talk about it, because you can't think the thought. But obviously, being is not all of existence. So there was that which he who, she who existed without being, from which being emanated. And when you try to get up on that thought, you just can't get it. You can't get up on it, but you know that it takes the edge off of saying that we are God, because you know that's blasphemy to most people. You can't go around saying that God exists in you, even though it's right there in the holy books. You can't say that, because people say that, you know, that's blasphemous. You know, God is God in heaven, and you are not, you know, and you don't associate yourself, and that's, you know, that's just a terrible thing to do. But the thing is, God is not the epitome of divinity, because it is that which existed without being. That is that realm. It's that realm where you cannot go. The mind, at least my mind, has not been able to go there. I just know something in here says being was brought into being by something that was not that did not have the necessity to be, did not existed in a place where power had no meaning, where presence had no meaning, where knowledge had no meaning. Because what was there to have knowledge of? What was there to be present for? What was there to be powerful against or for?
Exactly. And it's you resonating with a lot of the things that I think about all the time. And you are that. That's what you are. You can't speak about it. You can't think about it, because what you are is beyond all categories of differences and dualities. And just as you were saying, it's not a being. It is a word that we can use. When you use words, you bring in concepts.
Right.
You're bringing in concepts.
Then you diminish it.
Right. And that's why the best way to point to it is through metaphors and through symbols. You cannot literally say what it is. Okay. And a word that comes closest to it is nothing in terms of bringing to the mind
absolutely
what you're trying to express.
No thing.
No thing. Nothing.
No thing.
No thing. And out of this no thing came everything.
Right.
And that's where being came into being. And then this everything became particularized into particular things. And I kind of look at it like that which you are, which you cannot put a word on it, is you can't say anything about it. But that which exists came into being out of that, this undifferentiated awareness of how you can't really say anything about it.
See, you can't talk.
You can't say about it. But everything came out of it. And everything came out of it for a reason, being that, of course, the semantics of it, but there had to be a reason for being to exist, for everything to come into existence. This everything that's coming into existence is also referred to as consciousness. Everything is consciousness, which came out of this that we can't say anything about. Consciousness serves as the medium for knowing everything that you know about, because all distinctions are within the conscious field. And then consciousness creates for itself a medium for knowing, which is human beings. And humans create a medium, which it comes back to what you were saying earlier, culture. All things that are human takes place within the context of a culture. Everything that you know about yourself comes to you through culture. If you're not in the right culture, you're not going to be able to go back from that culture to this, to you knowing yourself as a human being through the medium of consciousness, back to knowing that you are that which you are trying to understand, which we're saying as God, or we're saying that the Supreme Being, the Almighty Spirit, which you can't really put a name on it, but that points close to that which you are, which is, if everything came out of it, how can you not be that? And us not being aware of that is what constitutes the ego condition, being misidentified with this body and mind. Sure, you have to transcend the mind, which is whereas all the dualities exist, in order for you to be aware of what you already are.
Shabaka Stone calls that concept before the beginning began. Our Kemite ancestors called it the Nun, the void, where all things, in science we call it the universe. They said at some appointed time, at some anointed time, unbeknownst to all other things, there came into being, rising up out of the waters of Nun, Ptah. Ptah was a primordial hill. In science, we call it the conversion of potential energy into kinetic energy, movement, the beginnings of physics. Up out of the waters of Nun, through the conversion of Ptah, sitting atop Ptah, comes Atum, where we get the scientific word atom from. Atum sits atop a ta and becomes what Aristotle later would call the demiurge, the unmoved mover. And out of this, atum would become consciousness and then would call things into being, which means he gave things names, the word. And the reason why we have a problem with putting words on what we're saying is because all three things, nun, pata, and atum, all existed at the same time. And out of this came Kepler, which was the process of becoming. So the concept of order and arrangement of the atoms and the molecules and the elements continued until out of the nun there came the atom, which started throwing pieces of itself off, threw off in science what's called supergalaxies, superclusters. Superclusters threw off clusters, clusters threw off galaxies, galaxies threw off stars, stars threw off organic life, which assimilated carbon. That's why organic life exists. So that our ancestors, on this Shabaka stone, it is 2 lines horizontal, 62 vertical. There are 4 sections. The first 2 top is where the Pharaoh Shabaka of the 25th dynasty, give or take 700 BC, give or take, because when we get this, we're going to take our history way back, but for now, they say 725th dynasty. He explains historically how he came upon this text in Memphis when the Napatan kingdom moved what they would call down happy, or to the north, came upon this document. And then what they did was that they listed what they had been able to translate using their own updated versions of how the universe came into being. And it goes from left to right, and you read from top to bottom. And across this, it talks about not just the origins of the universe. In fact, the director of the planetarium in New York City, African-American young brother, brilliant scholar named Neil deGrasse Tyson, just wrote a book called The Cosmos. And every one of his chapters mirrors the Shabaka stone. He talks about the creation out of the universe. He then talks about the ordering and arranging of the molecules that would then bring in what he calls superclusters, clusters, galaxies, stars, organic life on the planet, and then ends with humanity. And here they have the Osirian drama that talks about Asar, Aset, Nebetet, Seton, and the fruit of Asar and Aset that would give forward Heru, or the resurrected one. That's written on the Shabaka stone. The entire compendium of science is on that Shabaka stone. That stone should be right next to Martin Luther King's picture in every one of our homes, because that's a primary source. The reason why I say that's important is because a primary source is a source. That's not just a primary source, that's a secondary source. The primary source is that it tells a scientific story. It's a secondary source because it's commenting on an older document, many thousands of years older. In fact, if you were to look at when the Memphite text was actually written, to the point where Shabaka rewrote it, look to the point of Shabaka rewriting it and where we sit today in 2007, more time elapsed between when it was first written in Shabaka than Shabaka and us, by thousands of years. And Shabaka was saying, if the work of our ancestors was that important, because it was written, it is said, he talks about it being found on a worm-eaten document. And he said, for it to be for all time, we're going to write it in stone. That's where we get the proverb written in stone from, for all time, final word. He wrote it in stone. And he updated all of the information that they had been able to gain, the Napatan kingdoms of inner Africa had been able to gain in science in terms of this story. This is why the primary source is so important, because Copernicus and Galileo and Newton and all of them do not have a primary source. They have no primary source. Check whatever they have. They cannot give you a primary source upon which they did their research, trial, and error. In fact, it is Kepler who admits that he studied the golden law of planetary motion of the ancient Kemites. He admits this. Kepler, Johannes Kepler from Stuttgart, Germany. He admits this. Yet no one, Galileo said, he didn't say he invented the telescope, he said he perfected it. So obviously, there must have been a telescope before him. To understand what happened in the Renaissance or the rebirth of Europe, you'd have to understand the role that the Moors played from North Africa going into Europe and bringing this information, because the Africans of North Africa were the caretakers of this information. This is our history. But as you're saying, brother, if you don't look at it through your eyes, then you're going to get someone else's junk. Dr. Wade Nobles, a brilliant psychiatrist from California, says what we're experiencing right now is vomit. The meal that the European, the Greek, or the Rome, whatever we want to talk about, sat down and ate this rich meal of intellectual information, too rich for their system. They did not have the intellectual, spiritual enzymes to digest what they were learning, so they regurgitated it.
What a metaphor.
Yeah, it's one that you never forget. And Dr. Nobles warns us, don't throw it out, because in that vomit is the original meal. Examine it. Find out what was cooked, and then recook it. This time, your enzymes can digest it.
Well, you know, I'm just so moved by your continuing research, your continuing, but I understand what the reward is. I understand what the reward is. You do this for us, both of you. You do this for us, but you do it for yourself. Because in the course of doing this for yourself and bringing forth this interest and this knowledge and this ability to pay attention and to follow these leads and to persist and in pursuit of these truths, you are growing and developing and becoming, and that's paramount to you, and I know you understand the value of that. But a lot of people shy away from the hard work because in some cases people think that you are racist when you begin to say Africans did this, Africans knew this, Africans said this. You begin to get this kind of resistance because our people want to be humanitarians and they don't want to say that there are differences in people, and especially not differences that make Africans, put Africans in a better light than any other people, although that's not a difficult thing for the rest of the world to do. But still you are pursuing and you are standing on this knowledge because, as you say, it's the primary source. It's the only thing that has any foundation on which to stand. And I commend both of you because you are doing very valuable work. And I'm very hopeful that you will continue. And I hope that you will continue to draw audiences who will want to come and who will want to share the experience and want to then assist and cooperate with your scholarship because it's astounding. They flash in little notes at me. I want you to say whatever you think is important in the remaining moments that we have.
I would say, briefly in the short time we have, that one of the evidences of intelligence is also compassion, it's care, it's affection. It's not just knowing how to calculate, knowing how to remember things and knowing things in a real technical sense, which is what most people think that a person who's very intelligent displays. So in the sharing of what we are doing, all three of us, that's an act of intelligence because we're caring and we're being compassionate. That's the humanity. That's what being a human being is. You build relationships on that, not on money, not on how much you can put together and be famous and all of that. It's about caring, it's about sharing, and it's about compassion.
Dr. Clark, Dr. John Henry Clark, who was my teacher from a very young age, he once said to me in answer to what you said a little earlier. Many years ago, he said to me he wished on me what he was about to tell me. And if he could possibly give it to me, he would, but it would have to be me to do it. So when you talk about the reciprocity that I get from Brother Sebamurti, who has shared countless numbers of DVDs and information just helping me grow, and to his queen, Kunza, and to his family, and to you, Dr. Peace, who has given me this opportunity and continues to give me an opportunity. This is all reciprocity, which is one of the laws of the universe. Dr. Clark told me he was born to do what he was doing. And the greatest thing that I could wish on anybody is what I can say. And I am doing what I was born to do. And I wish that every human would find that special thing that the Creator has given them and understand that we are God having a human experience.
Well, I don't want to try to explain that to the audience, but I know I'll get some phone calls from some people who will just say, now you know you've just gone off your rocker, letting people sit on television saying we are gods. But if we would search for the truth, any holy book that you read, the kingdom of God is within. Jesus said it. Any holy book that you read will take you back to yourself. And it is written on the walls of the pyramids to know thyself. So if in searching for yourself you find out that you are more than the roles that have been assigned to you in this incarnation, and you find that you're becoming more valuable to people because you are caring more and sharing more, then, you know, you don't have to call it God, but it certainly would be godly behavior. Would you agree?
I agree.
It wouldn't hurt for us to be more like our Creator, would it? It wouldn't hurt. I thank you so much, Sebamurti. This book, What is Intelligence? A Look Beyond Mere Thinking. I think I have the last copy that you had, but you need to get it back in print.
Okay.
Because this book has, there is nothing that I could say about this book that would not be complimentary. This is good sound thinking, it is good sound scholarship, and it shows that you have taken the time to practice what you preach, and I salute you for that. And Kaba Kamene, for you to come all the way here from New York to help us to grow, I commend you for it, and I look forward to the next time and the next time that you return to us.
Hotep.
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 Tap.